Okay. Happy Wednesday at lunchtime, everybody. This is Lunch with EFI. We have a full house today. This will be fun. We encourage interruptions and conversation. So we will be New Yorkers today. There's a favorite lyric that I'll quote from a song that I enjoy from around 2010. And it says, "There's no need to be an asshole. You're not in Brooklyn anymore." And so, good song, good lyric. It just reminded me of that. Okay, so again, welcome everyone. We're going to start off. I'm taking the appetizer today for our meal, and we're going to talk about school closures. So, I've been banging this drum for far too long, and this is all I talk about lately. But I think it's worth continuing to talk about, and then I'm trying to keep it top of mind because I'm supposed to present on this in a few weeks. so there's another reason to keep it top of mind. But I jumped over to the National Center for Education Statistics. Looked at a few different tables and just combined some of the data. So I want to talk through this with you guys and see what you think about it. Here you can see we've got years 2010, school year 2010-11 through 21-22, which is the most recent year for which data is available from NCES. We have estimates beyond that, but this is the hard data that you can find in their tables. So a couple of things. One, I was not surprised at all to see the numbers dropping. If you look in the percent closed column through 21-22, and especially between COVID and that most recent year. And the reason is because of course, the giant infusion of cash through ESSER funds. So that was not...
It just lowered the student-teacher ratios dramatically. That's all, right? We've employed the same number of people. We keep the same number of buildings. We just have fewer kids in those classrooms, fewer kids in those buildings. It's the New York model.
Yes, yes.
Their enrollment is plummeting, but their staffing and buildings are the same.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. And what's interesting, and I wrote about this several months ago, there was a Arizona Auditor General's report that kind of tipped me off to this. And then I started looking at other states, New York, Pennsylvania, Florida, and others. And if you look at the amount of capital funds that were redirected toward M&O expenses, the number was way off kilter, and for years after ESSER. So if you follow that trend, I mean, I haven't found an exception yet, and I haven't looked at every state, so I'll allow for the possibility that it exists. But for every state that I looked at, that trend was consistent, that they were routinely taking money that they should have been using for capital expenditures on buildings, maintenance, upkeep, that kind of thing. And I know M&O, but it was really, they were really taking the money and putting it towards staffing, new staff.
This is janitors, lunch ladies, secretaries, all the people. And again, as the buildings get empty, the number of paying customers per support personnel is getting out of whack, right?
Yes.
But look, the stimulus money allowed this to get out of hand. Yep. But the stimulus money doesn't last forever, and taxpayer money doesn't last forever. We actually have been through this in a baby way in the past, which was the baby bust in the late 70s, early 80s. There was a baby bust. and there were just too few kids in schools,
and they were us.
They were us. Well, you're right, some of us, and while the school systems tried to delay the consequences as long as they could, eventually they couldn't avoid it, and eventually you have tax revolts. And so the California property tax revolt is kind of the ultimate political example of what happens when school systems keep spending money with no kids in them. Eventually, there's a larger number of taxpayers who don't have kids that are like, why are we paying for this? Why are we paying for empty buildings? Why are we paying for teachers with no kids in their classrooms? And so this will not endure, as the dude might say. Did I say that correctly?
The dude abides.
The dude abides.
This will not stand, man.
This will not stand. Is that what he says? Okay. This will not stand, man. And so really, it's just a matter of how the pain is allocated. And by the way, the pain is going to be allocated much more severely in blue states with larger union membership. They're really going to take the brunt of this. Yeah. I mean, migration has softened the blow in Arizona, but it's worse in Illinois.
Well, when you look at that graph, actually, it looks like overall still the number of schools is increasing, that's the trend over the last decade. And so
the other thing is that the baby bust is just making its way through schools. Or I'm sorry, this birth dearth. It takes a couple years, and also it's like a freight train. Like, it's coming, and there's no stopping it. It can't hit the brakes fast enough because the number of births will eventually make their way into a high school, but it takes a decade for that to happen.
What Ladner? What was your number? 60% of kindergarten children.
Yeah, this is from the Common Sense Institute. Just between 2019 and something much more recent than that, the percentage of Arizona families sending their kindergarten student to their zone district schools has gone from 80% to 60%.
Well, so that's the other thing is they're bleeding students to other sectors, both charter and private, through subsidized choice programs. And so
this is this kind of nexus that I've been talking about so much, is this perfect storm where you have the birth dearth, you have school choice, parents have options, and you have the end of ESSER fund, like that. All of those extensions, by the way, they ended in March. So yesterday was the very last day for any extension of.
I assure you, they still have squirreled some of that money, good amount of that money away. They're not out of that money. They moved it to one pocket and they put it in their other pocket. So
yes, money's fungible, absolutely, 100%. But I think that's why I've been saying over the next 18 to 24 months, the number of stories, like I just asked AI this morning, Grok, I jumped on, I said, how many news stories, do a thorough search of all the news stories that say something about permanent school closure. I don't want winter storm closures. I don't want, whatever. I just want permanent school closures in the past year. Give me a 12-month snapshot. And it estimated that there would be north of 1,500 schools slated for closure. This is who knows how accurate that is. There's my disclaimer. But the number looks to be much larger than what you saw in the graph here, right? So
Matt and I drafted some spreadsheets for Heritage a couple of years ago where we used Digest of Education Statistics projections of enrollment going forward a decade and applied existing ratios, student-teacher ratios and students per building ratios. And we projected basically how many layoffs and how many building closures do you need by state over the next decade? And we could see, like in some states, it's not much at all because migration is offsetting their birth dearth. But some states, the pain is going to be quite big. And there's no, you can increase those ratios, but they've already been increasing them. And there's a limit to how taxpayers are going to be willing to pay for empty buildings and teachers with no kids.
Yes, right. Okay,
So
there's
I mean,
my appetizer.
this is good news in an odd way. It's good news in that it's refreshing when there's actual accountability in education, where there's a consequence to decisions. And when there are consequences for decisions, there are better decisions made. People do better things when they experience the consequences of their decisions. And so this is a healthy development for our school system, that they are experiencing consequences, they're unavoidable consequences, and therefore they're going to start making better decisions going forward because they have no alternative. And it's good news. It's painful for individuals who are involved, and I feel bad for them. But overall, for the system, it is a healthy development.
100%. And that's why you said there's no alternative. And that is absolutely the case. I mean, they're between a rock and a hard place, and the walls are closing fast. There's a mixed metaphor for you. But
well, I don't understand why the unions are not the most pro-fertility organizations.
Oh, right? Yeah.
They should nonstop. They should be joining with all of the trad, mom groups and all of the influencers who are trying to promote fertility. Like, that should be the unions, but instead it's like the opposite is what seems to have taken over.
No more customers.
Remember,
right? It makes no sense.
Remember Eric Adams telling families to have fun while they were home during the school closures for the recent snowstorms.
Right.
You join into that chorus.
Right.
Well, the thing they're doing, the unions are doing, is they're trying to find other industries to expand into. So they're like Berkshire Hathaway as they see it, and the textile mill is closing, but there are other businesses to buy. So they're getting big into healthcare. They're trying to organize nurses and allied health people, and they're growing into higher ed. And so with Defense of Freedom Institute, and on my last appearance here at EFI's lunch, I talked about this report I did on radical foreign influences making their way into graduate student unions organized by affiliated with the AFT.
Yeah.
But that's that's the line of business they're in now, because they don't have kids in K-12 to who are customers. They're
just gonna go through and decimate everything that they. Okay, we've been in school long enough. The population has dwindled to where we have no customers. Let's move into healthcare.
Right. Well, speaking of healthcare, it's been a busy week for Do No Harm. Ian and I had a bunch of stuff come out. So I don't know. You want to talk about the racial concordance and pain study, or do you want to? Or do you want to talk about the OCR filing first?
Well, I mean, you definitely have to be the one to talk about the pain study. It's your study.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So we released a study through Do No Harm, and there was also an op-ed in National Review attached to it, which looked at there's an idea called racial concordance, which is the belief that when the doctor and the patient are of the same race, that health outcomes are better. Okay. And that's a general claim that's made. And then there's a specific claim that's made with respect to the treatment of pain, that Black doctors are better at assessing and treating the pain of Black patients. And
do you have something to show here, don't you, Jay? Do you want me to put it up?
Sure. This is just you can see the headline of the report. So the AAMC, which is the American Association of Medical Colleges,
Association of American Medical Colleges.
Okay, so Association of American Medical Colleges. I can't remember whether the first A is association or the second A. In any event, this is the organization that represents med schools, and they put together an amicus brief in the Students for Fair Admission case, which ultimately the Supreme Court decided to prohibit racial preferences in admissions in education. But they filed a brief hoping to maintain racial preferences. And the reason why they thought racial preferences were essential is because of this theory of racial concordance. It's necessary to say, unless you want people to die, right? I'm going to channel my inner, is that Go Remy, right? You know the Go Remy song? Sidetrack. But anyway, unless you want people to die, you have to engage in racial preference, is essentially the argument they tried to make. And they made the argument in general, but they also made it with respect to pain. They made the specific claim. They specifically said Black physicians are better at assessing and treating the pain of Black patients.
But that literally is the argument that they made, right? I mean,
that is I could quote the verbatim, but that is the essence of the sentence that I'm referring to from this brief. And there is a footnote for that sentence that cites 4 studies in support of their claim. Okay. And mind you, this is an amicus brief that was submitted by the AAMC and joined by 45 other health organizations, everybody, the American Medical Association, the American Public Health, everyone joined this statement. And all of them presumably read it, and they had attorneys who read it, and presumably they looked at the citations. Well, this report is about how the 4 studies they cite are not only bad studies, which I go through in the report, but they don't even address the question that the AAMC brief asserts they support. They don't even examine whether Black physicians are better at treating pain. The 4 studies that they cite are about differential treatment of pain by race, but not whether it's different by the race of the doctor. They don't look at the race of the doctor. Okay.
Wow.
So you have 46 leading health organizations making a claim, citing studies saying, science says you got to discriminate. And if you don't discriminate, people will die. And that's what the science says. And they cite the studies. And clearly no one read the studies or didn't understand the studies or didn't care that the studies didn't say.
But isn't it reasonable to infer that the physicians were of the same race if they got better treatment?
we that's not how science works. We don't get to make stuff up.
But Larry Fink would say, at least 12 months ago, Larry Fink, or 2 years ago, Larry Fink, he would agree. He would say, yes, we can infer that. Wouldn't he?
Sloppy thinkers will infer things that studies don't examine.
I kid.
But that's not responsible. These organizations were created and presumably have as core missions the accurate representation of medical science to the public and to policymakers. That is important to them. And that is part of why they demand deference to them as experts, is because they have a command of the medical science. But if they don't bother to read the medical science or understand it or don't care what it says, then they are betraying their core mission. There's no reason anymore to listen to these people, because if they're doing that, then the only thing that matters to them, the only mission they have, is the advancement of a political agenda and no commitment to professionalism and no commitment to medical science. And so the report isn't so much about this, whether there is in fact a racial concordance benefit, because frankly, that's been debunked, 100 different times by us and others. But the really novel insight of this report is how shockingly unreliable leading medical organizations are. And this is a problem. I mean, in truth, we need organizations of experts. We need institutions to help guide us on complicated matters, because we can't all just figure it out on our own. when a pandemic hits, we have to turn to somebody who knows something, who could tell us what to do, because we're not smart enough to figure it all out on the fly. Now, shockingly, in the COVID experience, we discovered we were kind of on our own, and we did have to kind of figure it out on our own. And that was a really disappointing experience, and that really hurt the medical profession that happened. Yep. And the trouble is that it's continuing. That wasn't a one-off. This is an endemic problem in these medical organizations. And the members of these organizations, it's in their interest to fix this, because if they don't fix it, their status and their pay in our society will go away. Okay, it will disappear, and doctors don't want this. But they have to understand that to maintain the deference that they receive, to maintain the status that they have, to maintain the above average salaries that they enjoy, they will have to exercise some care in how their professional societies behave. So if they do crazy stuff like, say, science says that kids have to chop off body parts or they'll kill themselves. Like, if you start doing that, you're really damaging your professional status. Mm-hmm. And if you go around and start citing studies that don't even address the questions that you claim they support, you're in trouble. And so I'm actually sympathetic to the doctors here. I want the doctors to fix this, because I want them to have to be recognized for their expertise. I want them to have professional associations that will communicate expertise to policymakers in the public. I want that to happen. The problem is we just don't have that right now. I want them to fix it. And by calling them out and trying to shame them, I'm hoping they'll fix it.
Well, I totally agree. And honestly, in 2019 at the NEA's, just to draw a parallel here, at the NEA's national conference, and they have a name for it, I can't remember, resident assembly or something like that. New business item number 2 was introduced, and it was brought by a few representatives from the NEA from Alaska. And these individuals introduced this business item, which said that any new policy the NEA adopted should have as its central focus student achievement, student learning, yada, 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 right? That was voted down. They did not approve it.
I think the difference here, frankly, and it'll be this is a tough pill to swallow for people in education, but no one has really thought of teachers as professionals like doctors. No one has. I know that the teachers want that. I get it. And I know that their professional associations are asserting it, but no one's ever really believed that. But
no, fair enough.
Yeah,
fair enough. My point is that the association of these people is making different decisions. Now, I'm not. Obviously, there were a lot of people there that representative assembly is what I meant to say earlier. Obviously, a lot of representatives voted against it, and they voted it down, and that makes up the association. But I guarantee you, in the same way that you had these folks from Alaska that brought that, and some amount of support, I'm sure, for the business item was given by other people, you have doctors that are like, yes, I agree, Jay, you are absolutely right. But my association is a political association more than it is a representative association of me and my views.
Well, the issue with the AMC is it's only about academic medicine. So, it doesn't have that much to do with rank and file clinicians. Most of them are probably no attention to what the AAMC is actually doing. And so people who go into academic medicine or people who go into academia in general are weird and activist minded. And so we have a bit of an issue, I think, in that the normies are just out there practicing medicine, doing their thing. And it's the activists who hijack organizations like that and completely,
But supposedly the AMA signed on to this. And, so I take your point, but there are groups that sound, I guessed that
it's a broader societal problem that that institutions are breaking down, that institutions are not performing the functions that they need to perform. But this is fixable. I mean, civilizations go through these waves where we build up institutions and they're supposed to perform certain functions and then they fail, and then we either reform them or we replace them. And that, by the way, that's going to happen to these people too. They should understand that they're not eternal. Okay, if they can't perform their mission properly, we're going to find other institutions to do it for them, and they're going to go away. And so none of these organizations, there are all sorts of societies that existed in the 19th century that don't exist anymore. And we can't even remember their names. And someday that may be the AMA and the AAMC, if they're not careful.
Okay, you had another.
Yes, I know, but this is our full lunch. And I don't know, Ian, if you want to maybe introduce this.
Sure, I'm happy to. So, I guess just to provide some background here, I would say Jay and I have both had concerns with something that we've noticed in American medicine, which is that there is this growing reliance on foreign labor. So Jay documented this in a Heritage report that came out, maybe a couple years ago at this point, showing that over the last few decades, the percentage of American physicians who were trained abroad increased from, was it 9 to 25%?
Yeah.
And so that's a pretty radical transformation within the American healthcare workforce. And frankly, something maybe that we should be paying attention to and even asking important questions about. So,
and it's not that we don't have Americans interested in going to med school.
Right.
The problem is the med schools in the US just haven't expanded to keep up with the demand, both the demand from Americans wishing to be doctors and the demand of Americans who need healthcare.
Yeah, there was some very naughty cartel behavior on the part of the AMA and the AAMC and others who thought, we need to constrain supply in order to get doctors high wages. And so that's part of how we got to where we are. But because they did that, now it is necessary for us to recruit a lot of our physician workforce from abroad. But that invites
and to be clear, they are helping us address shortages, and they often do bring high levels of skill and training. So we appreciate these positive things, but it's a systemic problem that led us to this solution, which while these individuals are helping us, may have other negative consequences.
So they can and often do bring those positive qualities. In other cases, sometimes they bring the values of their home countries, and that's something that we have to pay attention to as well. So Jay and I had a piece in Tablet last year called "Ask Your Doctor If Jihad is Right for You," with the observation that a lot of the anti-Semitism that has been observed within the healthcare space, a hugely disproportionate amount of it, is coming from these doctors who are trained in places like Pakistan or Syria or Jordan. And so that rightfully concerned us with everything else.
By the way, it's an interesting thing that in Pakistan, the production of doctors has become an export business. So they export 80% of the doctors they train. Only 20% of the medical school graduates of Pakistan work in Pakistan. 80% go somewhere else. Okay. Wow. So this is an export business that they have going on. And the very best people trained in Pakistan might be good, but the average training in these places, there's no quality control in the US at all for the training these folks get. We have quality control systems in the US, but we have no quality control system functionally for international medical graduates, other than that they have to pass some tests. But passing a test is not the same thing as being a good doctor.
Right. Yeah. And so in terms of their pipelines into the US, I think it was Jay who noticed this at first. There are some residency programs that have very skewed numbers in terms of the number of residents who are what are called international medical graduates. In other words, they did their training overseas. And not only that they're IMGs, but that they tend to be concentrated from one region, particularly the Middle East. And so we identify
the same region where their director comes from.
That's right. So we identified 3 programs where the proportion of residents who were trained internationally in all 3 had exceeded, what was it, 90% or at least 75%?
In the most recent cohort, it was all near 100 basically. But even if you looked across multiple cohorts, which means that they're making separate hiring decisions, all these programs were between like 70 and 98%. They were very high. And again, even if you're bringing in a quarter of your doctors from abroad, and even in specialties that Americans prefer less, the probability of getting near 100% is extremely low by chance, right?
Wow.
Yeah, it would seem to indicate a matter of preference towards those applicants, trained outside of the United States. And so Do No Harm filed an Office for Civil Rights complaint with the Trump administration against these 3 programs. And there was a Fox exclusive of this yesterday. And Jay and I had a piece in the Washington Examiner today. Jay, I think you still have to.
Yeah, we better promote that on Twitter. I haven't done that. Have you?
But it's getting a lot of chatter and a lot of attention. I think it's one of these issues under the surface that some people have known about for a little while, especially within the healthcare field. Doesn't it seem odd that there's this program that's almost all international, but nobody really, fully removing the fig leaf and bringing this to the surface. And so now we're here, and we're hoping that there's a proper investigation.
And to be clear, when discrimination occurs, it is hurting quality, right? If these programs are hiring because of national affinity and not for quality, then the average quality of the doctors they hire will be worse. So if they just have a thing for hiring Sudanese trained doctors, which one of these programs has like a whole bunch of Sudanese trained doctors, then the average quality of care in that area is going to be worse than presumably if they just hired on highest quality, they'd have some IMGs and some not. But having exclusively, Sudanese and Pakistani doctors suggests that they're hiring on a basis other than quality, which hurts. So this is not just about fairness for Americans or something. This is about trying to protect the quality of our doctor workforce by not having some sort of good old boy type national affinity network.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's crazy. And I'm glad it's getting the news that it is. So speaking of transportation, Jason's much better at that than I am. Matt, you are up for dessert.
All right. Well, great. So I published a backgrounder through Heritage on transportation and school choice. And it's called Modernizing Student Transportation for an Era of K-12 Choice. And this brief touches on a lot of different subjects we won't have time to touch on all today. We talk about the collapse of the yellow bus system and why districts can't hire drivers, and how school buses are sort of antiquated in any case because they're designed to take kids within a little limited zip code. And when you get into a choice environment, people are crossing the zip codes. But for today, let's just focus on the first 2 sets of columns here in this chart. As you can see, personal vehicles are delivering most kids to their schools these days. And the percentage of kids that are actually walking or biking to school used to be at almost 50% and has collapsed to a mere 11% as of 2017. If you go to the next slide, one of the main points I make in this study is that the act of creating new schools in and of itself creates proximity, right? In other words, this section is called Make Walking to School Great Again, right? When the first charter school opened in Minneapolis in 1992, there was a certain universe of kids that were within walking distance to it, right? And as you kind of expand the scope of what we could think of as being schools, which is happening, of course, with sort of multi-vendor choice programs like ESAs and personal use tax credits, you get a lot more proximity.
So, but
Right.
Matt, is this inconsistent with our appetizer? Weren't we saying, gee, that it's inevitable we got to close a ton of schools? And you're saying we got to create a bunch of schools so that people could walk to their schools more. So,
Right.
So how do you square that circle?
It's called creative destruction. We need both more new schools, and there are a lot of schools that are absolutely terrible.
So you mean we shouldn't just keep the same restaurants that we had when we were children? That some might close and new ones might open. I don't understand how that works.
That's the idea. Yeah, right. That we live in a dynamic world.
I thought that's environmentalism is the set of species that exist should be identical to what it was when I was a boy.
Right.
Absolutely. That was the right time. When I was a boy, those are the things that we want, and that just preserve that in amber.
The same goes for national borders and everything else.
Everything else, right? Keep everything the same. So, of course, the eye popper here is the number of micro schools. Micro schools bring a whole lot of proximity, but of course they're by definition small, so they don't have that many seats. The universal private schools, I think, and Matt, your first chart showed that we're about around 99,000 schools total nationwide, right?
Yep.
So basically, the point is the more the better. Okay, and in choice-rich environments like Arizona, it's sort of become this grim rite of parental passage to sit in a hot car, dropping your kid off and picking them up from school.
That's what parenting's all about.
We could do a lot better. If you go to the next slide, another kind of big idea that gets introduced in this study is basically I was led to it when I got curious as to whether the school co-location program in New York City, whether the kids in the co-located schools got to ride on the bus or not. And the answer was yes. So this got my wheel spinning. And this is a chart from the Common Sense Institute of Arizona that basically shows while school district enrollment in Arizona, that's the line, keeps going down, the millions of square feet that the district system has continued to go up, right? So it's not just that we have this sort of like Flintstones bus system that can't cope with a Jetsons type, education system and get kids to where they want to go. It's also this huge overhang of underutilized and or sometimes vacant school buildings. So if you go to the next slide, basically what I call for as a partial transportation solution, and there's not going to be any one, just magic solution to all of this, is basically for lawmakers to explore the possibility of passing what I call super co-location. Co-location started in New York City. There are over 700 co-located schools in New York City. They're all charter schools, right? And we've got, and the kids all get to ride the bus. The state of Florida emulated this policy in something they call Schools of Hope. But Schools of Hope, is very focused. First of all, again, it is exclusively for charter schools, and it is exclusively to put charter schools in underutilized district space in areas with low performing district schools. Super co-location would make two big changes to this. First of all, we get rid of the whole, like only in low performing areas, right? Because anyone could benefit from a policy like this. And number two, it shouldn't just be charter schools. It ought to be possible to set up a framework, a legal framework, even a standard sort of lease agreement, and to allow private and micro schools to locate in underutilized and vacant district buildings, and also to allow those kids to ride the bus, right? Our taxes, we're the one that pay for this bus system, right? And yet the bus system is exclusively, almost entirely exclusively focused on taking kids to their zone district school. And if you're not going to your zone district school, then tough. Figure it out on your own, right?
Now, is it Pennsylvania that requires districts to use their buses to transport charter school students as well?
Yes, and even private school students. I believe it's Ohio and Pennsylvania.
Okay.
I mentioned that in the study. It's something that others could emulate. Ridership, especially since COVID on the bus system, just keeps going down. The costs keep going up. We're all paying for this, so why in the world are our kids not benefiting from it, right? But I don't see that as a total solution because the districts are struggling to hire drivers, right?
Yeah.
Are there cultural changes that have occurred over time that are also barriers here, and not simply proximity? So, like, people are more nervous about their kids walking on, along streets, that they're worried about their safety in a way that past parents were more hands off.
It certainly could be the case. I think that, if you go back far enough, you could all of us could think of that oil painting of the little red schoolhouse, with the kids happily running up to the school, right? And so part of this is just that we wound up going for these bigger comprehensive schools who are by necessity further away, right? So some of it could be the rise of the personal vehicle. It would certainly be the case here in Arizona, the rise of the personal vehicle. And I suspect that we're well above the national average on in terms of this, is simply because the bus system is of very little benefit to anyone who's not going to their zone district school, and kids still need to get there, right? So you wind up resorting to that.
Well, and isn't it the case that over half of all students in Arizona do not attend their zone district school?
In the Phoenix area, that's true for K-8. Yes.
I think that's district and like of any school type, right?
Yes. Yeah. So the same is true whether you use open enrollment, right, which remains the biggest form of choice here, right? If you use open enrollment, for the most part, the yellow bus system is just not for you. And in fact, I did a within district transfer for my boys when they were very young, 20 years ago, and they weren't allowed to use the district bus despite the fact that I was a district taxpayer, right? So we got this very, very antiquated yellow bus system. It was literally designed for a system that is more or less gone, right? Like everyone goes to their local school. That means for all the flaws of zip code assignment, it made transport super easy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you got an attendance boundary, you run a bus in it. So yeah, I like the idea of what Ohio and Pennsylvania have done. But the problem is that districts still can't hire drivers.
That is the problem, right? Because I've said before on lunch with EFI that you drive past some of these district facilities. This is in any state, by the way. This is not just an Arizona problem or whatever, fill in the blank. You drive past these district facilities and there are dozens of yellow school buses just parked. Right. And they're parked there perpetually. I'm not talking about, well, they're done with their route or, whatever. They have dozens and dozens of vehicles, buses, large full-size school buses just sitting.
Yeah.
Won't Elon Musk solve this for us someday?
Well, I talk about that too. There was the famous Frederick Pondicio bet, right, from about 10 years ago. And in fact, I was with Jason when he purchased a beer for Pondicio in payment of that bet because he lost.
What were the terms of this Ehrlich bet?
I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was basically like a certain percentage of kids getting to school in driverless vehicles by a certain date.
Mm.
And it brings to mind that expression about, the future is always inevitable, but is not always punctual.
This sounds like the New York Times headline.
Yeah.
Ehrlich prematurely forecast.
Yeah, right.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, so
You're still right. Just premature.
I do talk about the state of play and self-driving vehicles. We're, of course, a hub for this in Phoenix. Hey, he won't like it. He likes anything, so we've been at this for about 10 years. I think it is inevitable that this is going to play a bigger role in the future. Because basically, when you really think about it, what you really need is a system that takes smaller groups of kids to more places. Okay, that's not yellow buses, right? That doesn't mean you couldn't have a role for yellow buses, but yellow buses can't do that job, right? It's not the right tool for the job. So the self-driving vehicles just got on the highway for the first time, I believe, in December. Here in Phoenix, Matt. I don't know if you've seen them out there.
Yep.
And
freeway speeds.
The problem is that as of right now, they're actually more expensive on a per rider basis than a Uber with a driver.
Why is that?
And the technology costs, and they're using Jaguar SUVs and whatever. Yeah, I mean, that can come down over time, right? Technology can get better. I think it's safe to say at this point that the technical challenges to self-driving vehicles are more difficult, perhaps, than their early boosters portrayed. But it's probably a thing. It's just not a thing that's going to arrive on a schedule.
Matt, I love that you do a deep dive into a centrally important issue in education that absolutely no one thinks about. And the reason why I love this is because there is insufficient reward in think tank space for people identifying new issues, pointing out making novel observations. What we have is a lot of who can repeat refined talking points more effectively about already established issues. And I think there's over rewarding of that. But if you actually want thinking in think tanks, donors should prioritize the ability of organizations to have people who will identify new issues that are out there on the horizon that we haven't thought about yet, that we need to start thinking about. That's really important stuff. And I'm always drawn to the people in our field who are able to do that. And it's a skill that shockingly few in think tank land have.
I completely agree. And I think this kind of, these bleeding edge ideas are the ones that lead to, really good, important, and transformative legislation that improves the lives of people. I think this is one of those things that makes it more convenient, that makes it more efficient, all of that.
So it's really a function of living in a choice hotbed. You don't have to be Karnak the Magnificent to notice that the student transportation system is like Jurassic Park.
Well, however you come by it. This has been a very filling lunch. It's as if we're anticipating your Seder tonight. If you're observing Passover, you have a very filling meal here from EFI.
That's right.
But that's just because we're doing so much good stuff.
Yeah, this has been great. Thank you all for joining for the I think it's been a good set of topics today. It's been fun to chat, and wish everyone a great Wednesday, a happy April Fool's Day, a wonderful Passover, all of the above. So,
well, Good Friday's coming, Easter's coming.
Friday, it's Holy Week.
We have all of the celebrations are coming here. So
good time of year.
Yeah,
okay.
It's a good time of year. All right,
everyone. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.